Hi, are you Kiyoshi 1?
Yes.
I'm here to ask you 73 questions.
Okay.
What's the cultural difference between daily necessities and leisure activities?
The difference is for daily necessities, all people must consume food, wear clothing, and find shelter, while leisure activities, each cultural group has their own art and recreation.
Okay. What's the difference between a habit and a custom?
The difference between a habit and a costume is a habit is a repetitive act and individual performs like wearing a hat every day, while a costume is a repetitive act of a group that becomes part of life.
Where do folk and pop culture originate?
Culture originates from a hearth, while folk is mostly anonymous hearths.
How do they diffuse?
They diffuse because by one location to another slowly, and for pop from hearths or nods by modern communication.
And how are they distributed?
They're distributed widely across many countries with little physical factors, and for folk by a combination of local, physical, and cultural factors.
What's the difference between folk and pop culture?
Folk culture is practiced by small groups, and popular culture is practiced by large societies.
Thank you. Hi, are you Kiyoshi 2?
Yes, I am.
I'm here to ask you 73 questions. How is the material for folk houses unique?
Well, it is influenced partially by the resources like available. So basically it's by like the environment. So it can be stone, grass, sod, animal skins, and the two most popular ones are wood and brick.
What causes the rapid diffusion of popular clothing styles?
Well, popular clothing styles are diffused by like occupation and income. So, for example, it could be like a businesswoman who wants to wear like a pantsuit during like the weekdays, but then on like the weekends she wants to like wear something that's more fashionable, which is more for social purposes, which means a person's wardrobe is frequently changing with like the latest like fashion trends.
How do they do it?
by improved like communications for a like example, probably like on like Instagram, Snapchat, and YouTube, because those are because that is where some of like the youngest like influencers are located on.
What are folk and popular culture food preferences affected by?
Folk foods are affected by availability of like the product, and popular foods are basically more by like cultural values.
Why can you identify a family's ethnic origins by looking in their kitchen?
I mean, say if you go over to like a friend's house and they're making like beans and orange rice, you would probably think that like they would be like Mexican.
What is the concept of terroir?
It is basically like the contribution of a location's distinctive like physical features to the way food tastes.
Why are certain foods craved in folk culture?
Because some cravings are usually like related to like a belief system or how you grew up with like
What's
design.
an example?
An example can be Abapone people, which how they grew up in Paraguay, and they used to eat jaguars, so they could grow up strong and brave.
How is the production of food influenced by the environment?
Well, usually food production is influenced by environmental features and is influenced by soil, climate change, and also like
What are taboos?
A taboo is a restriction on behavior imposed by social custom.
Why do folk cultures establish food taboos?
Some folk cultures may like establish food taboos because there is often like concern for like the natural environment.
Where can many taboos against consumption be found?
Most of them can be found in the Bible. Everyone needs Jesus. I'm just kidding.
What's an example of food taboos from the Bible?
They prohibited some animals that do not chew their cud or that have like cloven feet.
What is popular food culture influenced by?
It's influenced by I believe cultural values than by environmental features.
What did cultural geographer Fred Niffen consider the house to be a good reflection of?
Well, Fred Niffen considered the houses to be a good reflection of cultural heritage, fashion, functional needs, and the impact of the environment.
What are the two most common building materials in the world?
Well, like I said before, it's wood and brick.
How are some folk houses related to religion?
Because of like beliefs and secret spaces, like in like Madagascar, all of like the doors face like the west because that is like the direction of like main power, and certain corners are where some people pray.
What are the three hearths of U.S. house types?
I believe it is New England, Middle Atlantic, and lastly the lower Chesapeake and Tidewater.
What are some characteristics of U.S. popular housing?
Well, first the original would be traditional, but now would be all of like the three like neo versions.
Where do regional variation in folk food, clothing, and shelter derive from?
Well, I believe it is hearths, origin, and diffusion.
And that's all. Thank you. Issue 3.
Yes, I am.
Okay, I'm here to ask you 73 questions.
All right.
How does pop culture diffuse so rapidly?
So the rapid diffusion of popular culture is due primarily to electronic media. These methods include TV, internet, smartphones, and radio.
What's the principal obstacle to the diffusion of pop culture?
So the main obstacle to the diffusion of pop culture is lack of electronic media, such as like in developing countries, people don't have access to electricity, internet, and most of these methods cost a lot of money. So lack of money is another reason.
What's the world's most important electronic media format?
So television is the world's most important electronic media format, and it is the most popular leisure activity in the world.
What other electronics did TV supplant?
Television supplanted radio and telegraph, which were the most popular electronic media platforms in the 20th century, and other formats have arisen in the 21st century, but television is still the most important.
What's the average amount of hours a person spends watching TV?
So the average person worldwide spends 3.1 hours a day watching television, but in America the hours are even higher at 4.1 per day.
Why is TV the most important mechanism for pop culture?
The reason that TV is the most important mechanism for pop culture is that it is fairly accessible worldwide and that it's cheap enough to be obtained in developing countries.
Where is the hearth for TV?
The hearth for TV is, so it was invented simultaneously in the US, Japan, Germany, the UK, France, and the Soviet Union, but however the United States dominated the television scene for its first couple of years, and then it eventually spread to Europe, and then later.
Can you describe the diffusion of the internet?
So just like television, it started off in the US, but then kind of spread worldwide. Even though like most of the growth has been seen in the US, like even more growth has been seen worldwide.
Okay, thank you.
Oh my god. You're welcome.
Hi, are you the second half of Key Issue 3?
Yes, I would be.
Okay, I'm here to ask you 73 questions.
Okay.
Why are Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube diffusing so quickly?
Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube would be diffusing so quickly because all of them come from the US and they're very popular websites.
What are the internal and external threats to folk culture that electronic media poses?
The internal threats that threaten folk culture would be how the government can control what you watch on TV, with the external threats being how sometimes TV shows can offend some cultures.
What are the three major developed countries that dominate the television industry?
The three major countries that dominate the TV industry would be Japan, the UK, and the USA.
Who views control of TV by developed countries as a new method of economic and cultural imperialism?
Many developing countries view it as cultural imperialism.
How do satellite and cable providers avoid offending folk culture?
They avoid offending folk culture by blocking out offending networks or censor unacceptable content.
What's the news media in developing countries dominated by?
The news media in developing countries is usually dominated by the government.
Why can't developing countries have their own independent news service?
Developing countries can't have their own news service because it's very costly to go gather news worldwide.
What parts of the internet do governments limit the access to?
Governments limit the access to good or bad things about the government itself. They limit content relating to illegal activity, and they limit information on armed conflicts or disputes and internet tools.
Alright, thank you so much. Hi, are you Kiyoshi 4?
Yes, I am Kyushi 4.
I'm here to ask you 73 questions.
Sounds good.
What challenges do folk and pop culture face to maintain their identities?
So both folk and pop culture face maintaining identities that are just sustainable into the future.
Why do many fear the loss of folk culture?
Because rising incomes can fuel demand for material procedures found in pop culture.
How are the Amish preserving their cultural identity?
By excluding the outside world as maintaining aspects of their lives as possible, and even in violence in a society.
How are the Amish preserving their cultural identity?
So they are doing that by excluding the outside world in as many aspects of their lives as possible.
How does marriage in India conflict with cultural values?
So there are rapid changes in long-established cultural values that can lead to instability and even violence in a society. So this threatens not just the institutions of folk culture, but the sustainability of the society itself as a whole.
Sorry. How does pop culture view the environment?
So pop culture can significantly modify or control the environment, and it may be imposed on the environment that rather than spring forth from it. And as many folk customs, for popular customs, the environment is something to be modified to enhance participation in a leisure activity or to promote the sale of a product.
How does the diffusion of pop culture impact the environment?
So survival activities and leisure activities. Of these two leisure activities has a higher impact. And the leisure activities such as sports and movies have a very high environmental impact. Also, many clothing brands use as animal skin for things like as an example, like alligator skin or others.
How does pop culture pollute the landscape?
So two ways of depletion of source natural resources and pollution landscape. So the depletion of scarce resources include the use of non-renewable sources such as coal, petroleum, and other fuels widely used around the world. So mining for coal and etc. resources are very destructive into the environment.
How do you create a uniform landscape?
So spatial expressions of a popular culture in one location will be similar to another. In fact, promoters of a popular culture want a uniform appearance to generate product recognition and create consumption.
What's an example of a uniform landscape?
So when a popular custom in an area is similar to others, the distribution of fast food restaurants is an example of a uniform landscape.
What's a franchise?
A franchise business is a business in which the owners or the franchisors sell the rights of their business logo, the name and model of the third-party retail outlets, and owned by independent third-party operators called franchises.
What important factors contribute to the success of fast food restaurants?
Originally developed to attract people who arrived by car. Buildings were generally brightly colored, and recently they were built more subdued. with big fat kids, if I'm saying that right. Also, Suedo antique fixtures and stylistic detail.
What kind of waste does pop culture produce?
So animals were hunted to the point of extinction for their skins and furs, with eating meat such as pork and beef, also poultry in many parts of the world, which can affect the environment like negatively. Also, feeding grain to animals can be very inefficient, and animals eat more of their body weight in grain, creating loss in food. So basically, with the animals, like not treating them the right way or using something that's not that would not help the environment for both folk or pop culture could just cause damage to the environment.
What are the two series of activities involved in recycling?
It is picking up and processing, and also manufacturing.
What are the two programs and the two centers involved in pickup and processing?
Drop-off centers and buyback centers.
What do they do?
So drop-off centers are sites, typically with several large containers placed at a central location for individuals to leave recyclable material. And buyback centers are commercial operations, sometimes pay consumers for recyclable materials, especially aluminum cans. So like if you're to take your recycling to a local place where you can like get money for what you have that is recyclable.
What four materials are used in manufacturing?
They are paper, plastic, glass, and aluminum.
Why does folk culture face loss of traditional values?
So many fear the loss of folk culture, especially because rising incomes can fuel the demand for the possessions, typically for of popular culture. When people turn from folk culture to popular culture, they may also turn away from the society's traditional values.
What are the four major manufacturing sectors accounted for more than half of the recycling activity?
So it is paper mills, steel mills, plastic converters, and iron and steel foundries.
What are some
Sorry.
What are some common household items that have recycled materials?
So those items would be newspapers and paper towels, aluminum, plastic and glass soft drink containers, steel cans, and and plastic laundry detergent bottles, and yeah.
What industrial applications can recycled materials be used for?
They can be used to recover glass in a roadway asphalt or glass fault, and recovered plastic in carpet, park benches, and pedestrian bridges.
Thank you so much.